Fascism, excessive data collection, automation, and violence being used to put people down who fight back using activism and technological sabotage? Nope, I am not reading headlines. This is Watch Dogs Legion, a game from a corporation that monetizes the aesthetic of revolution while collecting a lot of data on you. Set in a dystopic version of London, so basically just real London, it is the newest game for the Ubisoft open world formula, and boy is this engine getting heavy. Thanks to a surprising extensive minimum requirement chart, I can see that while my high-end cousins are likely going to struggle a bit with this one, the game is reasonable in terms of 2020 minimum requirements. But if you know me, you probably know that this was making me wonder if this game could be run at all on integrated GPUs, using some special means. Turns out there's a couple of interesting things to look at if you're willing to dig through the configuration files. Welcome to the LowSpecGamer, let me show you. Before that, this video is brought to you by CuriosityStream and the Nebula Bundle. Support the most ambitious creator project ever and listen to my new podcast with the link down below. Watch Dogs Legion runs in the latest version of the Disrupt engine, the internal Ubisoft technology for the Watch Dogs games that stores its configuration files in the game folder in your documents in the form of an easily reachable XML file. The formatting on this one is a bit hard to read in Notepad, so I heavily suggest you use Notepad++ and the wrap line option. The graphical configuration is in this custom quality tag right in the center, and after lowering all the in-game settings to the lowest, there is still a number of things left to explore. Let me start with what I think is the most useful. Like many other games, Watch Dogs Legion has what initially appears to be a simple resolution scaler to render the 3D elements of the games at a lower resolution than the window without affecting the UI. A tool that every game should have at this point, and is often the savior of those of us with weaker GPUs, and this was also the method used by the old Watch Dogs 2. However, in Watch Dogs Legion, this seems to be a temporal anti-aliasing upsampling, which uses information from previous frames, similar to the one used in The Division 2 and For Honor, meaning that it does not just scale up from a lower resolution, but does some image reconstruction. I was super glad to hear that, because this feature was an absolute savior in those other games, and it could make bizarrely low resolution images actually look pretty decent. TAA upsampling, the poor man's DLSS. This is important because the multiplier value used for this in the menu is a bit odd. The lowest value here is 25%, when in reality the lower resolution used to scale from this is double, 50%. This is control defined by the variable temporal upscaling, which shows the actual value used for the multiplier, and that means that we can drop them significantly more. Hopefully you do not have to go that extreme on this, since there's obviously a limit to what this reconstruction can do, but it's a pretty darn useful thing to be able to control. Now, there is a number of variables in the same section that should, in theory, control things like extended draw distance, volumetric fog, and water splashes, and you can disable those by setting them to 0. I do not recommend it though, because they have all sorts of unpredictable effects. Stuff like disabling splashes will cause the game to crash on my APUs, or extended draw distance will just cause some bizarre visual glitches. So let's talk about something also destructive but more tolerable. Most of the in-game options that have several levels are represented in the file by a suitable variable set to the text PC followed by a number, with each number corresponding to a level in the setting. Now the curious thing is that after dropping all the in-game settings to the lowest, there still variables are stuck at PC level 2. And while most don't seem to change anything, geometric quality is super interesting, because this one is clearly on the menu, but the lowest value is high, which corresponds to PC2. However, you can manually set it to PC1, which is the hitting medium setting, and you can already see why they locked this away, as the game is way more aggressive with loading low LOD models for every geometric element like buildings, leading to very obvious pop-in, but a significant improvement in performance for those who need it. Turn it all the way to the hidden low setting, PC0, and now we are partying. While the level of detail system still works as intended, and unlike some other games I have experimented on the past, decent quality models are still loaded close to the player. When you look close enough, you start seeing the low detail models being used plainly in player view. I was surprised at how wide the effect was, and if you pick a static element, like a statue, you could very clearly see every step of the level of detail model loading. It's pretty interesting. Some models are more affected than others, and NPCs are hilariously low-end at just the right distance. Now, isn't that iconic? But if you're in need of extra performance, that's one extra setting that you can play with. Amazing. So now, let's talk about performance. While I have been complaining on Twitter that this game takes a surprisingly strong CPU to run at 60 FPS, it actually does not take that much to get to 30. This is the benchmark map on my Ryzen 3 3200G and its integrated GPU on stock clocks. And here, this is vanilla lowest settings. I have not messed with the configuration files at all. And it's doing fine. I used this as an opportunity to also run a quick comparison between DirectX 11 and DirectX 12, and I could not find a meaningful change in performance outside of margin of error. I did find that on DirectX 11 the game will stutter more when running in online mode, which is interesting. So I stuck with DirectX 12 for the rest of my tests. And for the real run, I broke out my aging Zen 1 Athlon 3000G dual core that has given me so much material to work with. To nobody's surprise, on stock clocks the game struggles hard on the benchmark map, mainly limited by its GPU, although it gets pretty close to a 20 FPS average, which is honestly higher than I expected. Now I'm using the hitting low geometric detail setting, which in movement is not surprisingly as noticeable as I thought it was going to be, and it does make a substantial difference. Let's finish now with a reduction of the TAA subsampling to 0.4 instead of the game's minimum of 0.5. And we're finally tasting that sweet 30 FPS. Surprisingly, at a 0.4 multiplier, the reconstruction is actually doing a great job because this is still quite legible. Also, as an additional advantage, at this low of a reconstruction resolution, it is hard to tell that the models are actually so low poly. There is still space left over to drop the resolution further, but you can absolutely get away with something like this in-game. I wanted to also throw a driving test because moving rapidly through London is one of the most taxing things you could do in this virtual world, and it does bravely at least keep it over 20 FPS, and it's probably difficult to fix on an integrated GPU without faster RAM, but hey, it works. So there you have it. Since no one gets to enjoy the beautiful disaster that is real London right now, maybe with some of this information you're able to enjoy the futuristic dystopic version that has surprisingly less traffic and faster public transportation. Look, I have spent some time in London myself during different projects and trips, and that means that I have spent enough time on the tube to develop a casual love-hate relationship with it, and to know well enough that taking transportation or just doing any low-attention daily task is much better if you have stuff like podcasts ready to go for it. Which is why I have my own. It's called Genesis, and I interview creator friends to get their origin stories and how their lives led to becoming known on the internet. At this point, I have interviewed people like Theo Sue, George from Super Bunny Hop, Patrick Williams, Rene Ritchie, Up and Adam, and the list goes on and on. Seriously, I'm spending a lot of time on this. You can find a free feed on the link down below. It is on Spotify as well, and new episodes always come first and ad-free to Nebula, my streaming service. Nebula is probably one of the most ambitious creator projects in recent date. We decided to work together to create a subscription streaming platform for stuff that just does not work thanks to the YouTube algorithm. Like a lot of fascinating original content we're posting there, which, if everything goes according to plan, will be joined by my first original, which explores the intersection of low-end gaming and low-income countries in a very interesting way. You could be watching an extended version of this video instead of listening to this ad right now. If you want to support the dream, I got a great deal for you. We partnered up with CuriosityStream, the best streaming service online for documentaries and non-fiction content for what I think is the best package in streaming right now. If you use my link in the description to sign up for CuriosityStream, you get access to Nebula for free as long as your CuriosityStream account is active. That's 2 streaming services for the price of 1. And that is not all, they currently have a 26% off offer on annual plans, so that is less than $15 for 2 streaming services for a full year. You want to help push us so that we can expand, add better apps, more platforms and make more original content? Well, now is your chance. Thanks for watching, and thank you to CuriosityStream for the long-term support.